Welcome to the Tuesday discussion at the Rachel Carson Center. My name is Christoph Moch, I'm the director of the center, and together with Dr. Dorit Lehrack, the director of graduate programs, we are convening the Tuesday discussions. And today it is my pleasure to introduce Dorit Lehrack. It's a pleasure to have you here, Dorit. We could have invited you for many different things, you've done so many intriguing things in your career, and I'm not even talking about the very beginning when you were friends with Angela Merkel, or the physicist. So she studied in the GDR like Angela Merkel. They knew each other. She's a bit younger, but they
Merkel is a bit younger.
Merkel is a bit younger.
Yeah.
Wow.
3 years younger.
Merkel is a bit younger, so you met at that time.
Don't tell.
But what I found interesting when we first met is that you are the one and only real expert on environmentalism in China. In Germany, everybody quotes you, but you started out in the GDR, in the former East Germany, and in East Germany there was a fledgling environmental movement that you were part of, and then was this after the fall of the wall when the Independent Institute for Environmental Issues was started in Leipzig at the time. It's now in Berlin, and Dorit was one of the founders of the Independent Institute for Environmental Issues, and you can find a seat over there. And after that, you joined the Greenpeace and opened the first Greenpeace office in Germany.
East Germany.
First branch office.
In East Germany.
East Germany was East Berlin. Then you went to Greenpeace, which had its headquarters in Amsterdam, and moved to set up offices in various Eastern European capitals, including Moscow and Kiev and Bratislava. I would have liked to invite you for that alone. I was wondering, I have to get Dorit to talk to us. Maybe one day you have to do that. And then Dorit was the head of Friends of the Earth Germany. Friends of the Earth is in German BUND, the BUND, which is the largest membership organization in Germany with 400,000, I think, members, and largest environmental membership organization. But really the reason why you're here with us today is because you're one of the very few people who spent a lot of time in China. You speak some Mandarin, everyday Mandarin. As I remember, we had you as an expert for a movie, or for a documentary called Smoke Town about Langfang. And Dorit worked with grassroots groups, with NGOs, and one of the things I remember is that you talked about that German environmental laws were basically used in China. You just used the same laws and gave them those laws, but then the problem was still in these cities, in the smaller cities. How do you actually implement them? Writing the law, copying it was very easy, giving it to people was easy, but then how do things happen on the ground? I'm really eager to hear about environmentalism, ups and downs, and actors in China. Join me in welcoming Dorit Lehrack.
Okay. May I stand up? It's easier for me to talk. I don't like sitting talking. This is so feeling like a pupil. Yeah, you can sit. You don't have to notice any facts, or I don't give you kind of a lecture, so I don't know what it means for your test later. I want to give you an impression, because I got 10 minutes to explain environmentalism in China, and I could probably use 10 years to tell you something about it. So it's not about anything what you really have to note here, but it may raise some question. Are you from China? No? No one from China here? 你好，我的中文的名字是雷多利。It's my Chinese name. It's Lei Doli. So I have to make a rush job. So I prepared about 7 slides here. And excuse me if my English is not always so fluent as yours, because I also didn't speak on a day-to-day basis English for the last 7 years since I'm retired. I'm just in a German community with old ladies, doing this kind of handwork, cooking and so on. Yeah? So I'm very happy to be here and to have a chance to tell you a little bit about China. So I was working as you would say, as an NGO developer in China and in Vietnam. So I was in a time there where grassroots really raised up, grassroots NGOs, not only in environmental issues, but also social issues, also poverty alleviation and whatever. Whatever topic NGOs are working on, and they need some kind of, they were asking for some kind of support from someone who was experienced with Western NGOs. So I came from Greenpeace and Friends of Nature, so I was the person they want to work with. And I was working as an integrated part of their community, not as someone sent from the German government to come with some orders and ideas about Western style, but I listened to what they needed, and then we came up with some ideas, projects, training, and so on. So this was the time what I'm talking about happened between 2000 and 2000 and 2014. After that, and this is what you all know, there's a big downsize for the Chinese NGO community and the civil society as such. So that's why I call it 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because I'm sure it will change sooner or later. But this is something we come to. This is only give you a kind of snapshot or keywords about what is the situation in China in terms of numbers. I had a friend who was a journalist with the German magazine Die Zeit, Fritz Vorholz, and he was always saying in China, this is the curse of the big numbers, der Fluch der großen Zahlen. If we have just too many people, 20% of the world population so far, but we only have 7% of the arable land. And for you, dealing with pesticide, history of pesticide, the Silent Spring thing, and so on, this, you see, alone from the number, it is a huge pressure on the topic of food security and also food safety in China. So if they want or not, they have to deal with that. They have to do something to keep the people, to feed their people, and not to end up in the hunger catastrophe, what was already the case in the 70s, after the when Mao Zedong took over. And this is not a situation where the government wants to come into again. So that's what they really try to avoid. That's why we have a problem with pesticides. We have a problem that about 80% of the arable land is polluted so far by different things. But pesticide, herbicides is one of them. Yeah, glyphosate was a big problem. And of course, on the other hand, they only have banned 5 of the most toxic pesticides like endosulfan and paraquat, but as we are saying, this is not really implemented. This is a ban on paper. It's not a ban in reality. That's why we can discuss later. On the other hand, you have this huge economic growth, where in my times the Chinese government started to reduce it, because they ended up with 8 to 10%. It was too much even for China. They want to reduce this one. But this leads also to burning of low quality coal everywhere, construction work, and the pollution. And on the other hand, China is the first one in using clean energy. So there are so many dilemmas in this country, what we have to see. Like if you look at the traffic in China, I think if you want to go with a German car to within the 6 ring roads in Beijing, we normally don't match the environmental criteria. And the whole bus fleet is driven by gas. And the problem is still the freight traffic. But that's one thing what we can discuss later. There is always this yes and no, black and white, the yin and yang in China. So that's something you have to understand. In the time where I was there, before the Xi Jinping era, there was really a growth in civil society. There was a kind of tendency to become a more democratic country, and also the government understood they need NGOs to help in environmental things, because you have the pollution issue, you had health issues, there were also social issues like poverty, there were work injuries, labor injuries, which were not really treated by someone. So a lot of NGOs came up who wanted to, in a certain way to assist the government. There was not this kind of opposition from the very beginning, but more the idea we are all one part of the family. So some people coming from the ground, some people come from the top. So this bottom-up, top-down approach tried somehow to link. Was a very interesting experience, a little different to Germany, but also what you coming from some other countries in the world, Africa, also South America, may experience in your life. So we had about 200,000 registered NGOs in 2009, coming up from about 25,000, and most of them were mainly dealing with environmental topics, but more in this kind of awareness building, training, education, maybe farmers' education. They would go to the fields and tell the farmers what happened when they eat the pesticide polluted vegetables, and what happened to their children. They would go to schools, they would issue brochures, and they would work with the local communities. This is the main idea of grassroots movement in China, to work from the bottom up and tell also the government what they don't know, what they should know, link up through different grassroots NGOs, but also through what we call the CANGOs, the government-organized NGOs, comparable to, in Germany, to trade unions or so, or to, government-based, government-funded NGOs. They play a very important role. Science plays a very important role. That's why I heard from Professor Mauch that he also had a kind of cooperation with the Renmin University in Beijing, because science is there. The Chinese government is an expert government. It's not like in Germany, where someone who is a teacher or a lawyer or whatever, just having a political career, ending up as a minister for whatever, environment or so on, and does not have this professional background. This is different in China. So they try to put people in the government who are experts in their topics, and most of them really are. It was very difficult for governments from other countries to have this discussion on this level, and they rely very much on science. So universities play a big role, also in pesticide awareness of pesticide investigations, and many of these governmental organized NGOs are coming from the scientific area. They belong to universities. They play a very progressive role in a certain way, because they're teaching the government. And the business was not a big enemy. So, I come from Greenpeace. We always we target share and campaign oriented. This was not the idea in China. The idea was up to 2010, probably going for the cooperation principle. After 2010, when the internet, when the social networks came up in China, also with the smartphones, because they just jumped over the period of how you call it, fastnets, permanent. Yeah, the landline thing was even not existing in China. So they immediately jumped to mobile phones, and then they jumped very quick to this kind of social network thing, and connecting by internet through their own platforms like Weibo or QQ or WeChat. So then campaigning started. This was almost at the same time when the government changed to Mr. Xi Jinping. Many things came together. But one thing what came almost first is the government wants to keep the control and not to lose it to NGOs who would just, talk via internet and create big campaigns. We had some big campaigns to support maybe river, to fight against river pollution. And the leaders of these environmental organizations who started these campaigns, they came all from the media. There were journalists, there were really experienced media people who had an inside view, so did this kind of investigative journalism. And from this point, they knew something is wrong. And they all spoke English very well, they had contact, so they organized themselves with the Western NGOs, or with not only Westerns, NGOs from the South or so, and the journalists were a driving source in civil society. So the decline of the NGO movement, it happened, this is the mixture of Xi Jinping and Mao Zedong over there, it happened really, the the government would always say, we don't like so many grassroots environmental groups because they are not professional. The lack of professionalism was the biggest argument. So in Germany, it's difficult to tell Greenpeace members or BUND members or whomever, you have no saying because you are not an expert. Not everyone can study environmental science or whatever. Yeah, this was the biggest topic to say, no, these people are not professional. They don't have a professional background. We want only to work with professionals. So the scientists come up, or with people, with groups who would really go the path, follow the path of the government, like this governmental organized NGOs, like the All China Women Federation. What is a good organization, but it's not, of course, not grassroots. So one part of the society was missing and is more and more missing after the decline in this kind of the government introduced a new registration system. That was how they could just keep the grassroots movement small. So every NGO who would like to register would have to have a kind of body, not body in so friendly, you can also call it supervising body, but they called it more or less body. They say, this governmental organized NGOs, they can help, they can support grassroots, they can help with funding, they can help with public outreach. But on the other hand, as the yin and yang, it was a control instrument because they could control. And if someone was saying something against an incinerator, maybe, or a coal mining, new coal coal mine, the things that they could say, this is not in line what the government needs it for this and this, and the community needs it, and this was always the point when the supervising, this body organization could stop working. It finally led to a situation that even the supervising organization didn't want to supervise any NGOs anymore because they were held as the responsible bodies. If maybe you found a small grassroots NGO and you want to oppose anything like traffic here in the city, and then someone tells you stop that and you don't stop, then the supervising organization was held responsible. That was a big counter that they moved more and more out to say we don't want to host these NGOs because then we come in a situation to be banned. Yeah? This was a very good tool to keep these NGOs small. But still, there is kind of big discussion. Actually, I cannot really tell you about the last, I think all of us miss the developments over the last 3 or 4 years, including the corona. I'm almost in daily contact with my colleagues, with my Chinese colleagues, but even they cannot really tell me what happens in terms of how is there space to work bigger or smaller, or do they now work on things which are really only like governmental organizations want them to do. They work in kind of limbo. We have really little information, even from the organization who is working close to the Rachel Carson Center. It's an organization, it's called PERC. It's the only organization, the only expert grassroots NGO in Yunnan who works on pesticides. And they really have a big action that, what's called paraquat? No, what's the name of this pesticide? Paraquat? You guys, you don't know? One of the herbicides, which was banned in 2012, actually in 2013, I think it's paraquat, I will find it. One of the 5 very toxic, like DDT or like endosulfan, this was banned. And this was more or less due to the work of this NGO expert organization. They're still working. I just talked to them the day before yesterday and find out what is new. And I don't get anything new. They don't know what is new. So this communication on that issue, that doesn't flow through China because the internet is controlled. They don't have Google, they don't have Facebook. Of course, they have their own network, but they are also very very, very much control. So I cannot see progress, I cannot see a step back, but I know that this Silent Spring also as a book and concept is known in China. I think I read that the first Chinese translation was already in 1979. It was earlier than some of the European languages. But I cannot find out what happens in that time with Silent Spring. I know what happened with growth of the limits of growth. So with the book what came in 1972 from this Club of Rome people, yeah. But I don't know what happened really with Silent Springs.